All right, good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us. Happy to see you all on the call. My name is Sean Burns. I'm a program specialist with 3C Ren, um, and really excited to bring you Energy Code 101 today. A great kind of fundamental training with our expert instructors. And we have more great courses coming up, but I'll touch on that later. Perfect. Next slide.
Okay, I'll get the hang of this, you guys.
No problem. I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom at this point, but again, just want to reiterate to mute yourself upon joining the call. We'll use the chat to take questions throughout the presentation. And at select times in between different topics, we'll address those questions. You can also use the raise hand feature if you want to share your question verbally. Perfect. And just one more note there, it is helpful. It looks like most of y'all have your names on the Zoom. It does help us take attendance and get out any learning units. So just add your name if possible. And then, like you see on the screen, the wonderful mountains in Ojai. If you see someone with this background, they're from 3C Ren. We're here to help. You can chat us directly any of your questions about our programs, about the training, or anything else you need help with. So make sure to look out for folks with the backgrounds. Perfect. Next slide. And just before we get started and introduce our instructors, I'm going to introduce 3C Ren and what is 3C Ren. So the Tri-County Regional Energy Network is a collaborative partnership between 3 counties on the Central Coast, SLO, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. And our goal is to improve energy efficiency programs in our region through programs customized for our region. So we offer services for building professionals, technical training, soft skills trainings, and for households. So free and discounted home upgrades to reduce energy use and utility bills at home. And one kind of note here is that we're funded by ratepayer dollars from our utility bills. So 3C Ren takes these dollars from our bills, collects them that would traditionally go back to the utility programs, and is able to invest them back locally into our region with a local program. So we're really excited to kind of get some of this historical funds that the Central Coast has missed out on. Perfect. And I like this image. It kind of sums up our approach. We're taking a nice holistic view of energy and energy efficiency in our region, engaging the public sector staff, engaging private sector businesses, our architects, our contractors, our installers, and our broader community to show how energy and buildings intersect into their everyday lives. So again, comprehensive look at energy use on the Central Coast. Awesome. So with that, we're going to go get started, and I'd like to thank our code experts, Russell Bayba with Franklin Energy and Jennifer Rennick with Inbalance Green Consulting for joining us today. And I'll hand off the presentation to you both now.
Great, thank you, Sean. My name is Russell Bayba. I would like to start off. This is going to be a fun training. There's a lot of information. We have a whole bunch of stuff for you. We're really thinking of this as just a basic energy code class. The first one, just really introducing the energy code to whoever it is, and offering a little bit of feelings for what to expect. And if you know a little bit about the code, this is maybe a refresher. So that's what we're thinking. Next slide. Okay, so our learning objectives today is, really just understanding what the energy code is for California. And we are trying to organize it in a way that is accessible to you guys and try to pull it apart so it makes sense to you. There's certain key aspects of the code that we want to focus on as well. So the course overview, there's there's a lot here. So we started off really
Do
looking
you think
at
I was, I thought it'd be better to err on the side of telling people what we were gonna do.
that, absolutely. So there's a lot here. So we're going to kind of look at where the code started, and we're also going to go back and forth a lot in this as well, because there's so many pieces. We're going to look at how the code works, within the state and nationally and locally. That the code is essentially updated every 3 years. And then really how the code drives construction practices. We'll also look into Title 24, Part 6, which is really the energy code. And then we'll end it with a whole bunch of resources, because the way that we design this is just a taste of what the energy code is. And we really want you guys to take with you something that you could access later. So these slides will be made available, and there's a whole bunch of resources at the end. And then we'll finish with Q&A. Great. So historical context. We wanted to put it in, how did we get this energy code? And you can go to the next one. And this is really where it starts. And so some of us maybe remember back in 1973, when there was a OPEC oil crisis. So OPEC stopped delivering oil, and through a war in the Middle East between Israel and the OPEC nations, essentially. So this crisis caused people to really rethink where they get energy. And California really started to think about it a little more closely than the rest of the states. But the embargo really made the country aware of energy, which we hadn't been before. And I love this picture because there's great big American cars, and then right next to it, there's a Datsun, which is a small European, or actually Japanese car that uses a lot less energy. But things within nationally, we reduced the speed limit from 70 to 55 to save energy. And Oregon turned off hot water in state buildings. And Jimmy Carter asked everyone to put on a sweater to conserve energy. And what's also interesting is that he also put solar panels on the roof. And then after he left office, Reagan came in and tore them off. I always think that's funny. Okay, so through this, California developed a building code standard commission, and they created in 1978 California Energy Code. And this really was to reduce energy consumption in California. And this graph shows really, and over time, really how it did it, or that it did it. And it was flattened this upward trend for the rest of the country. And for California, it really flattened out our energy use. And we've really adopt the most stringent energy code in the US. And so with our population rising, when the energy code was developed in 1978, we had a population of 23 million, and now we have a population of about 40 million. And our energy use here has generally flattened down, hasn't risen, which is, I think, something to be said for the code and it working. Okay, next slide. Okay, so building code is a set of standards, and it's enforced locally, and it's really designed around health and safety. And out of that, the energy code was there to reduce waste and unnecessary energy consumption. And this is done through a set of standards. And we're going to go into this more later, the more specifics, but basically this is the overarching principles about how energy code is implemented in the state. And as I said before, you know, this energy code works. We've kind of flattened the rise of energy in California. And there's a lot of different statistics out there, but California being the largest state in the union also has one of the lowest energy consumption in the country as well. Okay, and what's going on in California right now? So the energy code is moving slowly towards electrification. And as new houses are using a little less gas, they're using a lot more electricity. So this shift has already started to happen. Plug loads are one of them where they're rising a lot of electricity. We have a lot of electrical appliances. And natural gas is being less utilized. And in this case, in new construction, it is much cheaper to install new heat pump than to retrofit an existing building with a heat pump water heater. And the other part of it is a lot of jurisdictions throughout the state are starting to move to an all electric new construction stance. And this graphic on the left here really shows the efficiency drive from gas all the way up to very high efficient heat pumps. And these, I guess, are in Japan. Okay, next slide. Okay, let me turn this over to Jennifer.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm so glad you make it. I'm gonna take us on a little journey here through the California Energy Code and try to put the code itself kind of in perspective of how it fits in within the California Code of Regulations, and give you a little bit of background on the Title 24 building standards and how Title 24 Part 6 and some of the other parts fits into our overall picture. Kind of right off the bat, what I've found over the years in talking to a lot of colleagues and students and just the general public really is many people don't realize that California has about 28 different titles in their rules and regulations. Most all of them are part of the Office of Administrative Law. And there is an exception to that, and it's Title 24 Building Standards Code. And that does include the energy code within it. It also includes the plumbing code, mechanical code. We'll hit on that in a moment. That is kind of on its own in a way, but it definitely is related to the other titles, namely Title 20, which has to do with energy efficiency of appliances. And so Title 24 references Title 20. And in Title 25, you might think of like mobile homes, usually falling under Title 25 for housing and community development, but manufactured as in factory built, sort of mass produced homes for permanent foundations as a way to have affordable housing. Title 25 references back to Title 24 as well. Now, with the Code of Regulations, a great website, if you want to read these, free way to access this is through Westlaw. And when you go to Westlaw on the website, you can click on each of the titles that are part of the California Code of Regulations, and it'll link you to that code language. Now, with Title 24, however, it's going to take you back to, or take you to the Department of General Services that oversees the Building Standards Commission. So that's the only link that kind of takes you off their website. But from there, you can click on the link and access all the kind of Title 24 related documents. Once you are on that website, it'll list out all the parts of Title 24. So part 1's the administrative code, and that sets up the stage for all the other 12 parts of Title 24. And a lot of you on the call, you might be familiar with parts 2 and part 2.5 for the building code, and part 3 electrical. When you hear mechanical code, it's really part 4 of Title 24, same plumbing, part 5 of Title 24. Part 6 is the energy code. That's the part we're going to focus mostly on today. And then I've also kind of highlighted part 9 for the fire code. Title 24 does reference the fire code when it comes to photovoltaics or solar energy and having the proper clearances. Akin to all of this is part 11, the California Green Building Code, and there are energy measures in that code that is also part of the part 6 California Energy Code adoption cycle. So once you link there, then you can see each of the code books, and they're set up to follow the ICC kind of format. So those of you who are in code enforcement are used to looking at these for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing code books. You're going to recognize kind of this 2-column format, the front cover for the ICC, and this is, a good way to access the standards. However, if you really get into the energy code like I do, and you're the energy code wonk, there's some better resources for reading the energy code. But I do notice that it's useful to be able to understand this format so you can relate to the architects, the engineers, and the plans examiners. The energy code itself is updated every 3 years, so it's on a triennial cycle. The California Energy Commission has a lot of that responsibility, and I'm going to give you a quick kind of idea about that, and then we're going to delve a little bit more into Title 24 itself. The California Energy Commission, these two pages are just straight off the splash page when you first go to California Energy Commission, and it lists out the responsibilities of the California Energy Commission. And part of this is the energy efficiency building standards. And they also oversee energy infrastructure, renewable energy. A lot of the things that Russell talked about is addressed under the California Energy Commission. And the little splash page to the right just gives you an idea of the kind of resources that are available. And constantly there's public hearing meetings and things you can attend to get more involved. That triennial cycle has kind of an overlapping adoption timeline. In other words, the California Energy Commission spends a lot of time researching and having a future plan for how California is going to move towards a carbon-free, renewable energy state. And so, and that started in, before 1978 when the first code was adopted, and it's going to continue into the future. So give you an idea, there's a lot of research that has to go into making sure the climate files, weather files are updated and the metrics are properly understood and approved. And that's, a years-long process in the making. And then public workshops start and stakeholder meetings start. And then eventually just about a year later, we get to a point where we have what's called 15-day language. And so they're just getting ready to adopt those standards. And by July of this year, the standards and the energy portion of the Cal Green Part 11 are going to be adopted for the 2022 code, even though we're in currently the 2019 standards code cycle. And then by December of this year, the California Building Standards Commission will kind of give its approval. And then we have access, us energy consultants, the architects, the builders, everyone in the industry has access to all the documents and software and manuals. And then we basically get a year to sort of practice with it before the code is officially comes into effect, which will happen January 1st, 2023. And up at the top of the slide, I kind of tried to show the overlapping part of the graph where we are now, in that our 2019 code cycle started quite a bit of ways before, and it was just January 1st, 2020 that it came into effect, and yet we had already, 2 years prior, started looking at the 2022 code. And if you want to get more involved, the 45-day public commenting period has started, and I believe it's next week. I think it starts May 24th. There'll be the first round of hearings on that language. So there's a lot more to it than just a group of standards that we saw in that ICC format, sort of part of the code. There is a plethora of resources that the California Energy Commission puts out in order to be able to have software to run energy models, come up with cost-effective strategies that can be implemented by the industry. And so these 6 manuals here, these 6 books are my favorite. So that's why I put them up here. So the building standards themselves, and then these reference appendices, they're called, which has supporting material. And then there's these great manuals, which basically explains what that code means. And it's the non-residential manual, and then there's a residential compliance manual. And then kind of behind it, it's not really behind it, but more detailed, broken up again, non-residential and residential, is what's called the ACM, but that's for alternative calculation reference manual. And that's if you really, really want to know what all those algorithms are and what's approved to run computer modeling software. To me, that's just like pure fun, but I understand I'm supposed to take a real big picture view on everything today. And if there's any questions on this, you feel free to stop me.
And right now we don't have any questions, but
okay.
you can in the chat, you can write down your questions if as well. So feel free to do that, and we can answer them at our breaks.
Yeah, and Russell, do you have anything to let's see, anything kind of to add? Anything that maybe big picture I missed?
No, I think you're good. I think you're great.
Okay, and yeah. Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I could really go into the details. It's fun. To me, this is pure fun. I want to give you guys an idea next, kind of how the energy code comes into play in the design and construction world. And really, I think a lot of folks in the architecture construction practice they do think of architectural design and construction as a linear sort of flow. In other words, the architect with their team of mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, landscape, people design something, then they toss it to planning and building department, and a plan checker goes through it and looks to see if it meets all the aspects of Title 24 building codes, including energy, Cal Green, et cetera. And then that plan set, once it's approved, goes to a builder, and the builder just builds it like it is on the plans, or goes through a value engineering process and changes stuff, but doesn't always tell everybody. And then the code official comes out to inspect to see that it was built properly and see if what's built matches the plans. We actually advocate for much more of a team approach, and especially as our state moves towards a reduced energy footprint, more integrated these aspects of the energy use in the different parts of the code. We advocate for what's called an integrated design approach. And we think that the builder and everybody on the team gets together with the permitting agency, or like a commissioning agent, or your HERS rater. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And everybody works together on it to produce a much better project with a lot less issues, a lot less change orders, and lower costs, really. And so what does that look like? Well, the owner, the owner wants what the owner wants, and then they hire an architect, and usually architect or the owner together pulls together their whole team of supporting engineers, energy consultants, and et cetera. And at this point, it's up to the team to design a project that sure gives the owner what the owner wants, but also to meet the whole of Title 24, which includes the Part 6 and Part 11. And that is to include the plans and specifications. And in case you haven't heard this before, when we all say, oh, we're going to produce our Title 24 report or Title 24 documents, we're actually talking most typically about Part 6, and we're sometimes talking about some of the documents that go to Part 11. And then we engage in the plan review and permitting process. Here now, since the builder has already been on board with the project, they would have a really good handle on what is to be expected and what those energy measures are. And this where he's going to get his subcontractors and the rest of the team involved for the construction. And then we go through a process of verification and performance tests. Now, how we know that that is done properly is there's usually commissioning agents involved on large commercial projects, or there might just be what's called a HERS rater. And the HERS rater, that's Home Energy Rating System. So a person who is trained to do verification and performance testing on the equipment. And with that comes another set of reports, documents, and instruction manuals. And all of that is to show that the whole design met Part 6, Part 11 of the Energy Code, and all that is to be delivered to the homeowner or the building owner so they know that their building was designed accordingly and they have those documents. Now, oh yeah.
Let me add one more thing.
Absolutely.
So basically this is all designed to integrate throughout the whole building. So the energy code, takes into consideration the foundation all the way up to the roof with all the parts integrated together. And this is all really to reduce energy consumption and make it the homes more comfortable for people to live in using less energy.
Absolutely, that's right. So yeah, real big picture, and we're kind of going to get into it just a bit here on the energy code. The idea is that we take a building and we look at every aspect of the building that uses energy. And that's the heating system, cooling system, lighting system, hot water heating system, plug loads, you name it. Everything in your building, your houses and the buildings you work in are connected to the energy grid, electrical energy grid, or gas infrastructure. And we're going to look at every aspect of it. And the code does touch on every part of that building. And then throughout that design, construction, build process, the energy code comes into play. And it's, if you're not familiar with the whole code, it may seem overwhelming. Even I see Russ kind of smiling, loud audience. Even if you've been involved with the code, it might seem a bit detailed, and it is. And so that's why there's actually like a profession for energy consultants. But it's worth it. It's part of California meeting these really big picture goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and looking for a pollution-free environment for us to live in. So I'm going to take a closer look at Title 24 kind of itself. And for those who aren't familiar with how the energy code works in terms of showing compliance, there's three kind of key important terms to understand as we look in the code. And the first term is a mandatory requirement, sometimes in the residential called mandatory measures. And those are features that are applicable to all the projects. And you can usually think of these as like a minimum that you have to do to show code compliance. You can't do worse than the mandatory measures. And then the next thing the code addresses is something called performance method. And the mandatory measures are still applicable, but now under the performance method, you're going to be able to use a computer energy model to show how much energy this new building might use compared to a baseline building. And the next thing the code addresses is what's called a prescriptive approach or prescriptive component package, sometimes called. Again, those mandatory requirements are still required. And you would follow the prescriptive package based on your climate zone. And that package, it's basically like a checklist approach. There's a little bit of flexibility in some of the items on the checklist, like you can use a heat pump water heater, or you could use a gas on demand water heater. You got it one or the other, but otherwise you're gonna follow the basic recipe. And you might have noticed that I said this varies per climate zone. So another key thing to kind of understand about the energy code is that the California Energy Commission and all the research, they realized that California has actually quite a few microclimates. Our state is really, really unique in that sense. We've got coastal conditions, valley, inland conditions, mountainous conditions, and we have a huge difference between what happens in the southern part of our state and in the northern part of our state in terms of weather patterns and climate. So California's divided that into 16 different climate zones. And one of the great tools that the California Energy Commission added is an interactive climate tool, which just as an example, I randomly chose a location in San Luis Obispo County and popped up with climate zone 5. What I love about the tool is it's also satellite. So you can at the same time get the orientation of the property or the building that it's going to be located on and understand what climate zone it's going to be in. The reason the orientation is so important is because our buildings will use varying amounts of energy depending on its relationship to the sun. So something on the south side of a house, for example, is going to heat up a lot more in the winter than something on the north side of the house. And something facing due west in the warmer climates are going to cook and require a lot more air conditioning than something that's on, say, the northeast, north part of the house in the same climate zone. Anything you want to add to this, Russ?
No, I mean, I think you're covering all of it. This tool is great. I use it all the time. And, you know, they've updated it and it just makes it a lot easier to find the climate zone your building is in. So it's very helpful.
I guess the old way, you could still crack open the reference appendices, and you can look at a map like the one on the right. And sometimes it's a little tricky to know if your property, where it falls on which side of which line, to know exactly what climate zone is in. So I really like that interactive tool. It makes it much faster than looking it up by zip code. And interestingly enough, sometimes when you look up your project by zip code, you might find the closest kind of location, because not every city, not every location is in the computer software. So they culled it down, and sometimes you have to find the closest match. But if you go by zip code, I just had this happen in a project recently in Santa Barbara County. The closest by climate zone was actually a really mild coastal influenced climate zone. And that's, I had inadvertently chosen that, and the engineer caught it because he really wanted to make sure the loads were appropriate. And so we had to choose a further distant city, but it was going to be a much closer match climatically because of it being an inland location. So just a heads up on that.
Yeah, and then the Tri-County area, there's so many different climate zones, so that's also something to be aware of.
Yeah. So now when we get into Title 24 and how the code is kind of the Part 6 and the manual, if you were to just start reading it and take a look at it, the organizational structure might not be readily obvious. When I first learned about it, I didn't think it was super readily obvious. So I created this little organizational chart to kind of help you all understand that. And the first two subchapters really apply to all occupancies that are regulated. And when I say regulated occupancies, you do have to then crack open, if you don't have these memorized, you'll have to crack open your Title 2, Part 2 of Title 24, that book, and it'll decipher what those occupancies are, the A, B, E, F, H, I, M, et cetera, for like assembly, business, residential. Basically, everything falls under Title 24, except for hospitals and jails and some other kind of retention facilities like that. And then once you kind of make it through these mandatory requirements that are broad across all categories, then the code really is divided into two sections. And it's low-rise residential, and by low-rise, I mean 3 stories or less. It's multifamily or single family, but low-rise residential are sort of the last 3 subchapters. And then everything that's not low-rise residential is in the other 4 chapters. And it took me a while to kind of sort this out of, wait a minute, because I look at chapter 3 and it lists off non-residential, high-rise residential, hotel, motel, covered processes, but then you go to subchapter 4, but wait a minute, how come covered processes aren't listed now again, but these are other mandatory measures? So anyways, it took me a bit to just sort this out, that really subchapter 3 deals with your heating, cooling, and ventilation, as in indoor air quality ventilation. Those are what mandatory for the not low rise res. And then the lighting and the power distribution is in subchapter 4. And then really under both of those is your performance and prescriptive methodologies. That's kind of what a lot of us really think of the standards of what can you do, what can't you do. And it's interesting the way the code pulls out additions and alterations. So it's implied that subchapter 5 is really new construction, although additions and alterations does have some overlap. And so that subchapter 6 is kind of will reference you back. In some cases, you only have to do what's mandatory. So you got to go back to chapter 3 or 4, or you might have to do what's considered part of the new construction. So you'd go back to subchapter 5. And it's a similar situation on the low-rise residential side, where subchapter 7 has your mandatory measures, and subchapter 8 again goes into the performance, the computer modeling, and the prescriptive, like the recipe card. It's implied that that's new construction, because then subchapter 9 goes into the additions and alterations. And then to make things even less easy, to make it even more not easy to find stuff on the moment, under the subchapters, I didn't write this code. Then under the subchapters, you have section numbers. When I put in these white boxes, and those section numbers, they don't. It's like they operate independently of what's in a subchapter. It doesn't matter if it's called subchapter 1, you're going to have section 100. Subchapter 2, no, it's not section 200, it's section 110. But then you're going to jump to sections 120, 30, 40. Now, go to subchapter 6. Doesn't jump to 150, that's 141. Okay, they wait until you get to the low-rise residence to go to section 150. And then no, they don't go to section 160. No, they just stay within section 150 and just go 0.1, 0.2 on the residential side. Don't ask me why. It made no, I mean, I'm a math person. That made no sense to me, but that's how it is. So I put this organizational chart together for you guys in case it helps you understand the code when you go to look it up yourself.
And Jennifer, just to remind everyone, everyone's going to get the slides. So this is really meant for a, you can reference this. I would download this and put it on your desktop. You can pull it up if you're looking for something. And here's a whole bunch of different places you can go if you're looking for something. This is really, we're hoping that you're going to use this later. And so these are, you don't have to memorize everything right now, but hopefully you can use this as a resource, in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I wish someone had explained it to me how it was all organized, like a bunch of years ago. I would have loved that. One brilliant thing someone did figure out to do is in subchapter 1, go find table 100A. And this matrix in the code, I think, is super useful to help navigate your way into the code sections. And it's kind of set up by the applications. So I'm going to run through an example, and it's going to just roll right into an example of how you might take a look at something in a residential project prescriptively. So for example, we've got low-rise residential. So from there, we're going to take a look at the envelope, because we're talking about walls. And by envelope in kind of code language speak, envelope means the enclosure, which includes the roof, the walls, the floor, the windows, everything that's exterior to your building is considered the envelope. And then we're going to be looking at a mandatory requirement, and also we want to take a look at what's prescriptively required for our walls in that envelope enclosure. And we're going to go to that section. So now you can save yourself some time. Instead of going through the table contents, try to figure it out. This little chart is great. So we're going to go straight into those sections and give you kind of an idea of what that sort of looks like in, this isn't exactly what the code looks like. This is my interpretation of how it's organized for a low-rise prescriptive example. And so the standards themselves are going to be in the standard code book, and then a lot of kind of the translation of what these means is going to be in those reference appendices. So one of the sections that we highlighted in the chart was section 150.0C, and that was listed, and that deals with the wall insulation. And then the other category that was highlighted was section 150.1, and we're going to look at the building enclosure, and we're going to take a look at a prescriptive example. Now, this is what you would see in the code when you get to the component package in that section. So let's say we have a new home in Paso Robles, and we figured out it was climate zone 4 from that interactive map. We could come to table 150.1A component package for single family projects, and we're going to just look at the walls right now, because you're going to have to do this for everything: the walls, the windows, the mechanical heating and cooling, but right now we're going to just use the walls as an example. You would enter the chart at climate zone 4. So everything in that column potentially is applicable, and we're going to enter the chart for building envelope, framed walls, and it tells us we have to comply with a U 0.048. Well, okay, when I was first starting out with the energy code, I used to look at that and think, oh my God, just above it, if you were to look at what you could do for a roof or a ceiling, they would tell you, well, you need an R30 or an R19. So they're actually telling you what level of insulation you need. And if you don't know what R19 or R30 is, you could, when you look up like insulation to buy it, like go to Home Depot or something, or a big box store, there'll be a label on it telling you what R level it is. And it's an indication of how well the insulation is going to work. And there's a certain thickness and depth to it. So now with this, with the other part of the code for the walls, though, it gives you U factors. Oh, okay, so this is where you're going to crack open your manual. And so you've got your standards, you've got your reference appendices, but now we're going to crack open the residential compliance manual, because in there, they've got some great resources that help translate what does that mean? What does meeting a U factor of 0.048 mean? And you might have noticed the other climate zone said 0.065. So there's a great table in there, a number of them, but you can go in on the U factor section and scan now for a U factor, or it's sometimes called a U value of 0.048, and they're down at the bottom. So all three of those and any combination similar to that would be a prescriptively code compliant wall for climate zone 4. So you don't have to do an energy model if you follow the whole recipe card. And what it is it says, okay, you need a 2x6 wall that's at least 16 inches on center, and you're going to fill that cavity insulation with an R19 or higher. So it could be the R21 or the R23, could be like a dense packed cellulose. And you're going to have to add some exterior continuous insulation, like an R5. And so the scale mock-up on the right is trying to show that, where you've got your stud wall, you've got your plywood structural sheathing, some kind of building or house wrap, and then you have a continuous exterior insulation product, and that insulation is not interrupted by the studs, and that's the whole point. And that is kind of how you march your way through every aspect of the project, including the windows and the roof and your floors, etc. Now, give you an example of how the energy code comes into play on a non-residential project. And I think it's important to see that some of the requirements are different, but also you're just gonna now kind of open a different set of manuals. You'll still have the standards and the reference appendices, but now you're gonna wanna use your non-residential manual. And this is an actual project that we worked on, and it was a 2-story non-residential building in the Santa Maria area. And the architectural team was considering metal walls. And so, yeah, there's that non-res manual. They were considering metal stud walls. And that would imply that they would need a 2x6 wall, at least 24 inches on center with an R19, but an R10 continuous insulation. So a few inches of exterior rigid. The builder didn't want to deal with the exterior rigid insulation, so they were also considering, well, what if we went to wood stud walls? Well, yeah, then climate zone 5 in this location, wood stud walls, you would meet prescriptive with just a 2x4 wall filled with R13 insulation. That seemed easier to build, right? So the whole design team kind of looked at that as the potential. I want to point out that some of these change, though, depending if the climate zones are more mild or if they're less mild. So for example, with this same project, we're in climate zone 4, 9, or 16, so that might be up in Atascadero or inland and north from Ventura. Even if you did the 2x6 wood framed wall, you'd still need some exterior continuous for prescriptive compliance. And if you're in climate zone 6 or 7, like Santa Barbara, Ventura, right on the coast, that's the same requirement with the 2x4 wall. What we do or like to do, what we recommend is that as an architect or designer, is if you're familiar with the manuals, you could, and the prescriptive requirements, you could go in and kind of map out for your team what would be required prescriptively. And that way you would know as a baseline kind of what you're going to be starting with. Because really where this goes from here is a lot of times we're asked to do a performance energy model to mitigate against something, like maybe not do as much insulation on the walls, or maybe use a different lighting system or do a different mechanical system. So for this project, for example, the report, after we ran the energy model, the report does say, okay, it complies. And then the report, the Energy Title 24 report, produces an energy budget. And if the building is proposed design is less than the standard design, and you show a positive % compliance margin, the building complies, and you've now successfully done some trade-offs, either with the envelope, with the hot water, with the heat rejection or indoor fans and heating and cooling system. And so on the right-hand side, we've got a compliance margin sort of table, and it might be a little hard to read on your screen, but that top category, space heating, this particular building did worse on space heating than the standard building. So we got a negative score. But on space cooling and the indoor fans and indoor lighting, we did better, got a positive score. Domestic hot water, almost close to baseline, but a little worse. But added all together, the project itself was still 20% compliance over baseline. And that's basically how the performance method works.
And so Jennifer, if
Yeah.
you're 1% over the baseline, does that still pass?
Yeah, it passes. If you're 0.01% over, you still pass. If you're 0.1% over, you pass. I think if you're 0.0, sometimes it'll say pass and sometimes not pass because it does round.
And this is done before there's construction. So, generally we'd like to see a little bit higher than, 1%, over compliance, because things might change during construction and they might not have the windows that were spec'd, and that were maybe going to make up some of that difference. Maybe the cooling system wasn't as efficient that was available. So you want a little bit of margin so that the project won't come back failed when you finally build it.
Oh, that's so true. Yes. Just take that. Take what Russell said to heart. Give yourself some wiggle room is what we say, because sometimes in that what's called value engineering process, i.e. the team gets a hold of it, starts pricing out all the elements, and they look for ways to still deliver a code compliant building but costs less money. Then a lot of times we're asked as energy consultants to rerun the model a few different ways. And it is helpful to have that cushion, especially when you're at the schematic. So like that schematic level, use your prescriptive code requirements as a baseline. Then once you get into a little bit more, a lot of times the team moves away from a prescriptive requirement to a performance requirement so they can get these trade-offs. And then that energy model needs to be updated throughout the process to continually track what's happening in construction. And then at the very end of the process, the owner and the ownership, the developer gets their energy compliance report. They get their commissioning documents or their HERS forms and documents, plus all their instructions and manuals and training on how to operate their building.
And Jennifer, I think we have a little bit of time. I wondered if we could, there's a question, but I also I'm wondering, because we have a little bit of time, do we want to talk about the EDR at all? Because that's starting to be that's introduced, and maybe to break it down really basically. Part of developing this training is we didn't know how too much, you want to provide too much information, but maybe you can give a quick overview of where this is going and how we're moving a little bit away from TDV and moving into EDR.
Yeah, so yes, so what Russell's talking about is if you've read energy documentation compliance reports, you may have noticed that all the non-residential all the non-low-rise residential compliance reports has units called TDV, time dependent valuation. And all the reports used to do this prior to the 2019 code cycle. And that time dependent valuation is part of that research I talked about in the timeline with the metrics and the climate data. It also includes not just the energy used at the site, but also the amount of energy and kind of the valuation of the energy that it took to get that energy to the site. So it's, you know, energy isn't made freely. We make the energy and then that energy is delivered to the site and then we use the energy. So sometimes it takes 2 to 3 times, maybe more energy just to deliver the one energy of unit. So that's where TDV came in. They just happened to pick KBTU per square foot per year as that sort of metric for the TDV. Now, additions, alterations, and your non-residential reports all are still based on TDV. But starting in the last thought it would be more useful to go to a system that's similar to what HERS, the home energy rating system, uses. So now those new residential projects are rated on a scale from 0 to 100. And it's a little bit like a golf score. The lower the score, the better. And the thinking is if you produced as much energy on site with your solar, photovoltaic, renewable resources that equals how much you were going to use in your building, you would end up with an EDR score of 0 for zero net energy. So that's where the EDR comes in. So you might see that difference on the reports now where, wait a minute, I'm doing a residential addition, but it's telling me TDV, but wait a minute, I'm doing a new ADU, new construction, and I've got an EDR. Yeah, those numbers don't match each other. It's a different metric now. And Russ, do you know in the 2022, are more things going to move to the EDR? I did not follow up on that.
I don't know, but my guess is that it's probably so. I haven't looked into that directly, but I think we should start getting ready for that because, you know, renewable energy will be, and batteries are going to really be ramping up. And so that score is probably going to matter more and more. We do have a question. What is the Energy Code's approach to solar exposure? So I think, you know, that, that was a question.
Okay, so we might need clarification. Solar exposure, meaning for solar energy, for renewable energy, or like a building and its solar exposure. I'm going to guess it has to do with solar energy right now. And so low-rise residential, new construction requires a nominal size of photovoltaic to be part of the project. And for the non-residential, non-residential side of the code for the 2019, it's just still a solar ready requirement, which means you're supposed to be ready and map out the area on the roof available or a nearby building within 250 feet or maybe covered parking, but some designate a place where solar could be installed. And if you are not asking that question, please ask for clarification.
Did that answer your question, Jose? Well, if you get a chance, you can just put it in the chat and we can come back to it. I think the next section is a super important section about resources. And again, you'll have these slides available and use certainly this whole presentation as support, but definitely the next resource section is also really helpful. And I just want to remind everyone, we are also a codes coach. So we have a certain service, and you can give us a call or send an email. The email is in the chat, and Jennifer, myself, Grant, and Lauren all are on the codes coach team, and ask your questions there and we can answer them.
Oh, and I have a resource slide for that, and what we can remind people and give you information on how to contact us. I think part of what we're trying to do, well, let me rephrase that. What we are working on with this for you, for everybody, is to hit kind of maybe the main bigger pictures of the energy code. We hope that this works for people and that we can go deeper into the code with upcoming series and other presentations. But a lot of what we want to do is leave you with a basic understanding of kind of where the code Title 24 fits within the bigger picture of all the code requirements of California, what websites to go to get a hold of those documents, where to go to get support for understanding those documents, and where you can find additional resources so that you can dig deeper into all these things, including getting some real specific questions about your own projects answered. I think the California Energy Commission has a great website. So right away, this is a website that you're gonna want to know about to learn more about the energy code, because you can access the upcoming code cycle and find out what's happening with the public hearings and what's going to be adopted into the new code. You can read the 45-day language that's come out to understand what's going to be coming up, so you can prepare. You'll get alerts to when the software is available and participate in that. This is the link that I use to get into that climate zone tool. There's access to all the manuals and the ACM and the standards themselves through this part of the link. And there is also linking into the Home Energy Rating Systems program and the HERS links, and there's energy videos, and there's on and on and on the California Energy. This website, I love it, right? So there's so much.
Yeah, I bookmarked that page, so that's a great resource.
Right, and it just keeps, you can keep going deep and deep and deep, because they're constantly doing research and publications on where the state is going with energy. So you're gonna find just about everything you need there. This newsletter, the Blueprint, I think is a great newsletter. It's published quarterly. It's short, it's quick to read. I really like it because of the common question and answer section. And they have great clarifications, often with added graphics to explain some code issues, or if they hear back that jurisdictions and the public is having a hard time interpreting what was in the standards, then they'll put an issue and put some clarification around it in this publication. So I think that's also a great one on the website. And then Energy Code ACE. The Energy Code ACE website is great, and Energy Code ACE has taken those manuals, Title 20, and taken the Title 24 Part 6 Energy Code, those residential, non-residential manuals, and they put it online, and they have made it searchable. and with different links back and forth. So if you need to zip around in any of those codes or those manuals quickly, this is what I have as a desktop link, you know, a hot link on my browser, because I use these guys a lot. It's a much faster way to find all the code features of the energy code than those other resources I showed you. Those other resources work, but this one's searchable. It's just not going to be in your 2-column ICC format, so it might look a little different. They also have a plethora of resources and tools on the site. They've got a whole section called fact sheets. They've got a whole section on resources that lay out what triggers what aspects of the code, their trigger sheets. They've got these amazing guidebooks. And they have also tools on here to help you autofill and fill out your compliance documents if you're doing the prescriptive compliance approach on any of it. I love that. The CEC links to some of those form compliance forms, actually. So this one is the other one. If you're getting into it, put that one on your computer too. If you're more interested in kind of the home energy rating system and understanding about that, CalCerts and Cheers are the two organizations that have been approved by the state of California to have what's called a code documentation registry. We didn't really go into that very much, but in sort of the design construction process for residential projects, that Title 24 document would get uploaded to the website, one of the registries. Your plans examiner, your code official also can log on to that website and pull the documents off of the website. The reason they're doing it this way is because in one portal in one place, now we can keep track of the energy documents for the house, who owns the house, the location of the house, and who the builder is, and who that HERS rater is going to be, because the HERS rater will come in during the construction side of it and have a place to upload the documents that show what was installed and show that they did those construction verifications. And then that makes the complete package. The plans examiner, building planning department can see that that whole process was completed for part of the energy efficiency. In addition to that, there's a whole bunch of other resources on these web pages on how to be better educated, how to become a HERS rater, guidebooks on how to do quality installation, for example, which is one piece of the HERS puzzle. I can just go on and on about this stuff. These are great resources as well. And I put in this resource here, housing, community development, Title 25 related. I specifically put it in because we're seeing a lot of kind of movement, so to speak, on manufactured housing. And so there's a great like factory built housing handbook for the builders, for the enforcement agency. And there seems to be a lot of kind of misunderstanding on, is a factory built house, because it's under Title 25, does it have to comply with Title 24? And the answer is yes, because a factory built house in these situations, it's not really a mobile home, and it's not really a portable building that's used temporarily someplace. These are homes that are meant to be on permanent foundations, could be part of a multifamily complex. We're working on one now in the AG area, Arroyo Grande area, where we are working with a manufacturer who's building all the homes off-site in a nearby factory, the warehouse, and then they're being trucked and being placed on their permanent foundations. And in some cases, they're duplex, in some cases, they're quadplexes. But yes, for those type of projects, you do have to comply with the Title 25 side of things, but you also have to comply with Part 2 of Title 24, Part 2.5, same, the electrical code, plumbing code, mechanical code, and yes, the energy code and Cal Green code. It all comes into play. So that's a great resource that really clarifies that. And last but not least, before we go into questions, yes, as Russ mentioned, we are part of the Energy Code Coach team. And through our 3cren.org website, you can go to Energy Code Connect and you can click Ask an Energy Code question, and you will, or you can pick up the phone and call us. And you will be connected to either Russell or me or Lauren or Grant, and we will do our best to answer any and all of your energy code related questions, including the energy code side of Part 11, the Cal Green code. And Russell, what else do you want to add, or have you been seeing any questions?
There's one question. Yeah, one question that we have, and so we'll answer this, and Sean can go into the last part, and then we'll also after that be available here until 10:30 for other questions. So the question is, when you're talking about Energy Code ACE's resources, what was the name of the prescriptive form that you mentioned? I can't remember. Do you remember which form that was?
I think I just said that you could, that they had the prescriptive compliance forms. They have, oh gosh, Sean, quick. I can't do it on my computer. If I start Googling something, the whole presentation will disappear on me. But they have dynamic forms. So you can enter their website and actually go to an area that will ask you questions about your project. So for example, I most recently used it for a prescriptive outdoor lighting project where the architect was doing the the lighting concept themselves and then working with their electrical engineer, but we wanted to make sure that we were on track for code compliancy. So based off the architectural drawings of what they wanted to do for these special old-fashioned looking light fixtures, we got all the specs, we worked with the architect, laid it out, and then we used that link and answered a series of questions and used the dynamic forms to produce that Title 24 to show the architect that their design, in fact, was going to meet that code.
And at the top of the Energy Code ACE website, there are a series of drop-down menus, and one of them is Tools ACE, and it has a link to open up all the forms, and so it's really well laid out. I think recently it was updated. It's very, very user friendly. So go to Energy Code ACE, and then on the upper left corner it has drop down menus, and it should get you to what you're looking for.
Can you see my arrow moving on the screen? Do you guys see that? No. Okay. If I put it over here, do you see an arrow moving?
Oh yeah, there, we can see it now.
Okay, so so these up here, there's 4 categories: Get Forms, Tools ACE, Training ACE, Resources ACE. So that's what Russell was saying. If you click on these down arrows, it'd be so cool if we could do this live. I don't have the internet to do it live. But
Jennifer and Russell, I dropped the link in the chat too, right to the forums link.
Oh, perfect. Oh, great.
Perfect, George. Thanks.
Thanks for doing that. Yeah. And because these are great resources. So you get those, click it down, and then each one of these kind of opens up, and each one of those is just packed with information. So you may it may take you a little bit to kind of click around to find. I just say explore, click on everything and check it out, because it's so deep. Every time I log on, I see they added something else and another resource. I just recently downloaded one of their guidebooks because I thought, ooh, all this information in one place is a guidebook. This might be a great resource to then hand to somebody else so they can have it in one place, that kind of thing. But the forums is probably key, because the forums has become kind of the platform that is being used for code compliance. Let's see, any other questions?
Not right now. Maybe we should move it on and let Sean
Okay. I'm going to click.
finish it up.
Yeah, back into there. Okay. And I think you're on, Sean.
I'm on. Well, first of all, thank you so much for helping to break down the energy code and all the components. I learned a lot. And before we address any more questions and sign off, I'll provide a quick overview again of 3C Rent and our services. So perfect. Next slide. If you are interested more in the energy code, we have a whole program on it, that Energy Code Connect. So we serve all building professionals, like Jennifer and Russell were talking about, for both the residential and non-residential applications of the energy code, for plans examiners, inspectors, architects, contractors, installers. We can help. And we have 3 services. So we encourage you to continue to stay curious and ask your code questions. We have a service as linked in the chat where you can ask a question online or over the phone. And even when the time's appropriate, you can get support in the field on site for your projects. And like this great training, we have a bunch of other trainings diving deeper into the energy code, into the different requirements, and into some of the navigation and compliance documents that you need to know about. And finally, we have regional forums where we kind of take the energy code, take some current events or local issues, and bring them together to discuss with some great guest speakers. Perfect. Our next program is building performance training. So while we have a lot of energy code support, we also understand that buildings are more than the energy code. And we want to be able to address higher performing buildings as a whole, and with a focus on serving both current and prospective professionals to the building industry. And we have instruction on technical skills around stuff like ventilation, heat pump technologies, zero net energy, and then soft skills too. How do you market those and incorporate that value into your business? So in short, we want to help new workers, existing workers thrive and adapt to a changing building industry. Perfect. Next slide. And here you see all our contact information.
Did I miss something?
No, we have a home energy savings program, but we're working on it right now, so not offering it right now. But if you want to learn more about everything, you can check out the links on here. It's super simple, 3c-ren.org. Visit our site and check out definitely the Energy Code program and our Energy Code coach. Perfect. Next slide. And then closing this up, we do have AIA and ICC units available for you today. If you weren't sure that you entered them while registering for this course, give me an email. My contact information is on the screen. I can help you out. Like Russell and Jennifer mentioned, the slides are a great resource today. We'll send them out later today, along with the recording and a quick survey. If you do have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. And then finally, we do have a few upcoming courses. We have a course on zero net energy, how to achieve that for residential buildings. Next week, after that, we have a continuation of a kind of higher performance building, focusing on all electric constructions and heat pumps specifically for heating and cooling. And then connecting to this course, we have our home energy rating system registry training that will help specifically kind of public sector professionals navigate that portal that Jennifer was referencing earlier and understand the HERS registry a bit more. So those are some of our upcoming events. I do also have a flyer for you. I'll link that in the chat. That is for our regional forum, which will focus on improving indoor air quality on the Central Coast, creating better buildings. So check out the flyer. You can learn more about that, and we'll announce our speakers soon. But with that, that's the closing of my slides, and just want to turn it back to our attendees and instructors. If there's any last questions, we're happy to address them. We have a few more minutes left.
Feel free to enter it
Sorry
in
about
the
the-
chat, or you can just
sorry about the
unmute.
dog barking. Just, it's true.